in what year did you originally get interested in UFOs? And
well,
a Mad Painter are both here with you. So go ahead.
Edward Ruppelt's, Captain Edward Ruppelt, the report on UFOs. That's the book that I read, and that got me interested. In fact, what got me interested was it seemed that in the early 50s they were real close to getting something done about UFOs. I mean, so many times they set up interceptors, and it was they were just left in the dust and everything. So I found that very interesting. So as I started reading more, and then I started seeing that what I could do is collect things. I could go through old newspapers and find accounts of UFO. So that was another thing I started to do. And then when I became an adult, I tried to help Ted Blocher with his 1947 report. I got into it pretty late after he had pretty well written his book, but he continued to collect material afterwards, so I helped him out on that. And when I got out of I still collected stuff while I was in the military, but when I got out of the military, when I retired from the military, I put in for one of the grants that they had when they had the UFO Coalition, which was MUFON, the Fund for UFO Research, and CUFOS. And I put in for a grant, and I got it. And what the grant was is to go back and look at the 1947 wave, which is Blocher pretty well got an idea about how big it was because he had 850 different incidents that he collected. He looked at about 200 newspapers. I just carried that on until I had looked at and the people that were helping me. I had about 300 people worldwide helping me do this. So we found about nearly 3,000 UFO reports for 1947. Everybody kind of thinks that in 1947 everything was in the distance. The UFOs were in the distance. I like to say right now that that's completely false. Almost every activity that UFOs have engaged in is evident in 1947. So close encounters, electromagnetic effects, radar cases. So it's and so that was my project, and it wasn't just 1947. I had tried to collect material from 1900 to 1965. I use 65 is because there was a lot of. I used 1965 because that was when a lot of people got clipping services. So I didn't feel like it was necessary to look at the newspapers after 65. And boy, was I wrong.
Wow.
Now that we can call old newspapers up on the internet, I visited 50 different states and Canadian provinces, in my research. I probably went to about 125 different archives, state libraries, university libraries, state historical societies. So it's quite a project. And then on my website, I've went ahead and on Project 47, I've got 1947. I've gone ahead and put in some of the findings, and I continue to do that. And there's a lot of things. Very interested in the Second World War. You might say the Foo Fighters, but that was just one aspect of UFOs during World War II, and they were seen everywhere in the United States and out of the on the war fronts. So it's quite a historical march through time.
Well, where do we get started? Since most people go back to the Foo Fighters, and what you're talking about, I guess, was the original Project Blue Book, or that before that with NICAP. And Donald Kehoe, Keyhoe, and Ruppelt. Can you give us some names of the first people that you got interested in?
Well, I was interested in. I read Kehoe's books, all of his books. I never met him, but I did visit NICAP 15 times, and sometimes I stayed down there for 2 or 3 weeks at a time doing volunteer work. Things that nobody else liked to do, like filing cases and things like that. So that was.
Sorry.
Yeah,
Hello?
that was.
Yeah, I'm on the radio.
So that was one of the things. So I met Richard Hall down there, and Isabel Davis. She was like my mentor. She had been in civilian saucer intelligence in New York, and then she went to work for NICAP.
Wow.
Yeah. So.
What a lady, huh?
Yeah. She was quite a gal, and well, I met Dr. McDonald a couple of times down there, and he one of the reasons he came to Washington D.C. was to talk to Isabel, because he had great respect for the amount of knowledge she had. And of course, I know the people in Kufos, and I've been in MUFON, and I knew Don Berliner, and so most of the people.
Oh, you knew Don. I talked to Don. We're gonna have to change this whole show up. All right,
yeah.
Tell me what you know about Don. I called him Berliner, but it's Berliner, huh?
Yeah. Well, I don't know. Yeah, I met him down there, and we had a mutual friend in Scotland named Julian Hennessy. If you look on my site, I have one of his essays about British UFO, British government UFO investigations, and also his attempts to get official records and everything. And Don and I both knew him. So he helped me out with a few Foo Fighter reports that he had collected over the years. Since he's an aviation writer, He has a lot of aviation people that he knows. One of the guys that he knew was Sergeant Ed Clark in the Second World War.
Yeah.
He was a reporter for Stars and Stripes. I mean, he's a
Wow.
Okay, so
That's old.
So he got interested when he heard about Foo Fighters. He went right over to the 415th Night Fighter Squadron, which were the guys that had started to report them. They got in the newspapers because of them, and he interviewed everybody. And then
that's been around since 1861, right? The owner of Defense Media Activity, 1861, out of Washington, D.C. That Stars and Stripes. And that's where we were supposed to report anything, or they only wanted, when I was in the 80s, they wanted us, anything to go through their own media, right? They didn't want you remember when you were in uniform, they didn't want you talking to the press? Was that the way it was in your time?
Right, but Stars and Stripes, it's still published, but it was, it was the soldiers' newspaper.
Right. Okay.
So, like I say, on Christmas Eve, 1944, he went up with one of the night fighters, and on his way back to the base, he saw a UFO or a Foo Fighter, and it was red, and he couldn't write anything about it till after he got out of the military. But he did write about his night with the night fighters. He did write about his flying with the fighter pilot, but he didn't mention the Foo Fighters until he got out of the military.
Well, could you help us, Ahmad? I want you to jump in here. Ahmad's my co-producer, co-host, and he was in the Navy back before I was during Vietnam. But Jan, this is so special to have you show up like this. I'm sorry for the last 2 days we couldn't get in touch with each other through this communication, but I guess the universe finally wanted. I don't know where Dr. Bruce is. I hope his health is okay because he had committed to tonight. So, folks, this is Jan Aldrich, not Dr. Bruce Maccabee tonight, but they were friends, and they're covering the ACO Allied Command for us and the UFO Association history, as he was also a ufologist and investigator. We're going all the way back to 1861 when the Stars and Stripes started, and we'll give you a little history on that. But like you said, that was I guess you could say the Patriots, the military men's paper. But this is Jan Aldrich, and he was born in Ohio, raised in Connecticut. Jan, give us a timeline. When were you born, and when did you get into the military?
Well, I was born in the 40s, and I went into the military in 1967. And the reason I'm alive is because the Pueblo happened. The North Koreans seized a Navy ship, intelligence gathering ship called the Pueblo. And because of that, I went to Korea instead of going to Vietnam. So.
You got lucky.
So I would have been there in Vietnam right during all the real hot times. But since the North Koreans went and seized the Pueblo, I went to Korea. Of course, for a while there, they thought that Korea was going to break out too. When you see sergeant majors throwing sandbags, you know that something serious is going on.
Wow.
Yeah. So.
Did you go to North Korea at all?
No, we were not up on the DNZ, but we were close to it. I was at a place called Santeria, and then which is I don't know about